Hello, and welcome to the M.O.W channel. Today we will talk about a case from California involving a horrific series of murders that led to a death sentence, and a killer whose cruelty drew comparisons to Ted Bundy. He was known as John Berger or the dating game killer. Please hit the subscribe button and the like button. Now, let's begin today's case file. The tragic story of Rodney Alcala begins on August 23, 1943, in San Antonio, Texas. Born to Mexican-American parents, his original name was Rodrigo Jacques Alcala, though he later became widely known as Rodney. His childhood environment had a major impact on his personality. In 1951, his father moved the family to Mexico only to abandon them 3 years later, an event that likely planted deep feelings of loss and a distorted attachment to those who remained. His mother moved with Rodney and his sisters to the suburbs of Los Angeles and worked to support the family. From the outside, Alcala appeared to be a promising young man. He excelled academically and was popular among his classmates. While attending Cantwell Sacred Heart of Mary High School, he served on the yearbook committee and showed artistic talent. He also ran track and cross-country, building a strong and healthy body. Yet beneath these achievements, a desire to control and manipulate others was slowly growing. Joining the U.S. Army at 17 became a major turning point in his life. Although he hoped to become a paratrooper, he ended up serving as a clerk. It was during this period that his darker nature began to be officially documented. He gained a reputation for defying authority and acting in sly, vengeful ways toward fellow soldiers. Allegations of inappropriate behavior and assaults against young women revealed that he was already evolving into a dangerous predator. In 1964, he went absent without leave, hitchhiking from Fort Bragg in North Carolina back to his mother's home in California. Afterward, a psychiatric evaluation produced shocking results. His IQ was measured at 135, placing him in the top 1%. Yet he was diagnosed with antisocial personality disorder. This meant he lacked empathy while possessing the intelligence to deceive others and evade the law. He was ultimately discharged from the Army on medical grounds. Returning to civilian life, Alcala used his intelligence and artistic skill as a mask for his crimes. He enrolled at UCLA's School of Fine Arts and graduated, becoming deeply immersed in photography and film. He developed professional-level skills and used them as a legitimate excuse to approach young women and children. Introducing himself as a promising fashion photographer, he easily lowered people's guard. During this period, he displayed traits associated with narcissistic personality disorder, borderline personality disorder, and sexual sadism. He treated others as prey, feeding his sense of superiority, while the camera became his primary tool for observing and possessing his targets. Behind the glamorous image of an artist hid a cold predator disguised by a high IQ score. To those around him, he seemed charming and intellectual. His smooth speech and refined manners won people over, but it was all an act. He combined the connections he made at elite schools with organizational skills learned in the military, slowly carving out his own hunting ground. The foundations of his later murders were laid during this time, shaped by his distorted identity and his ability to exploit weaknesses in the system. Alcala tried to justify his abnormal desires by calling them art. He took countless photographs, attempting to preserve his victims' images forever and savoring the sense of control. A mix of parental neglect, failure to adapt to military life, and outward success fueled the creation of one of the most disturbing serial killers in American history. His carefully crafted persona served as a dark prelude to decades of violence. Perhaps the most chilling aspect of his early life is that he understood his psychological problems better than anyone. He did not hide his military diagnosis, sometimes using it to gain sympathy or to emphasize his intelligence. Within him coexisted emotional insight, artistic sensitivity, and a total lack of remorse. This combination allowed him not only to commit violence, but to manipulate the media and the justice system. Under the warm Los Angeles sun, the smiling young man with the camera actually carried the deepest darkness. Instead of using his intelligence productively, he wondered how to kill more skillfully and create perfect alibis. By the mid-1960s, as he stepped fully into society, it is possible that a map of death had already formed in his mind, foreshadowing countless victims. This was the moment just before the world would come to know the monster named Rodney Alcala. The way Alcala's crimes moved into full motion clearly shows how his sadistic tendencies and deceptive disguises combined to take innocent lives. The assault on Taylor Shapiro in 1968 was the first decisive moment when his predatory instincts surfaced. On a Hollywood street, he approached the 8-year-old girl on her way to school, lied that he knew her parents, and lured her to his apartment. He did not stop at physical violence and inflicted severe injuries. Using a metal object, thanks to a passerby who reported what was happening, police arrived, but Alcala had already escaped. This became the first example of how quickly and cunningly he could evade the law. To avoid police pursuit, He left California and fled across the country to New York. There he completely reset his identity using the name John Berger. He enrolled at New York University and posed as a film student, strengthening his mask as an artist. At this time, he walked the busy streets of Manhattan, approaching young and attractive women. Introducing himself as a promising photographer, he offered modeling opportunities and lowered their guard. The way flight attendant Cornelia Crilly became his victim in 1971 was similar. Pretending to be a friendly neighbor, offering help with moving furniture, he entered her apartment and then revealed his true intentions. Even compared to other serial killers, Alcala's methods were particularly cruel. He did not end victims' pain quickly. According to prosecutors, he would strangle victims until they lost consciousness, wait until they revived, and then strangle them again, repeating this several times in order to feel complete control over life and death. He sometimes photographed the victims during these attacks, treating the photos not as simple records but as trophies and tools for his own gratification. While operating in New York, he even showed the boldness to work briefly as a counselor at a children's summer camp in New Hampshire, hiding in the role of a trusted helper. However, when his wanted poster was posted at a post office camp, participants recognized him and reported him. He was sent back to California and faced serious charges, but he managed to exploit weaknesses in the legal system. When the family of Tali Shapiro moved to Mexico and declined to testify, prosecutors could not prove attempted murder and rape. As a result, he was convicted only of child molestation and returned to society after serving about 34 months. Paroled in 1974, Alcala did not feel remorse. Instead, he planned his crimes even more carefully. Within only 2 months he assaulted another 13-year-old girl and was in prison again. But this sentence also ended after about 2 years. In 1977, after being paroled a second time, he was still a registered sex offender, yet slipped through weak supervision and went back to New York. During this trip he is believed to have murdered Ellen Jane Hoover, the daughter of a nightclub owner and goddaughter of several celebrities. Her diary showed an appointment with someone named John Berger, supporting the conclusion that Alcala continued hunting in New York using the same alias and methods. After returning to Los Angeles, Alcala worked as a typesetter at the Los Angeles Times and gained social standing. During this period he gathered information about another serial murder case known as the Hillside Strangler and watched how police investigated. He even showed co-workers thousands of his photographs, which included nude women and teenagers in sexually suggestive poses. People simply thought he was an eccentric photographer and had no idea that a shadow of death lurked behind his camera. Alcala also kept belongings taken from victims in his locker. This was his way of remembering his crimes and reliving pleasure. He kept earrings and jewelry like medals. In the late 1970s his crimes reached a peak, and women such as Jill Barkham and Georgia Wickstead were among those who fell victim. They were found posed in carefully arranged positions, showing that he staged crime scenes almost like twisted works of art. By altering or positioning bodies in certain ways, he tried to mock investigators and display his sense of superiority. What stood out most in this stage was how perfectly he moved between two identities. By day he appeared to be a hard-working employee and talented photographer who greeted neighbors. By night he searched dark streets for victims. Using his attractive appearance and intellectual manner, he gained women's trust, and once they were within reach, he showed no mercy. His ability to continue committing crimes for years without being caught was not simply luck. It was because he skillfully exploited weaknesses in the justice system and public bias. In the end, Alcala used the entire United States as his stage to fulfill his destructive desires. From California beaches to New York apartments, he left traces of death wherever he went. The thousands of photographs he left behind were not just records, but an open mockery of law enforcement and a chilling sign that many victims had not yet been discovered. As he continued to build his criminal history while laughing at the law, he was preparing to reveal himself to the public in a way no one expected. This was the prelude to one of the most arrogant acts in the history of serial murder. This bold behavior eventually became the beginning of his downfall. But during this period he believed he ruled above every rule. He trusted that his intelligence would solve everything, and for a time it did. However, the many traces and photographs he left behind would later return through science and lead investigators back to him. How those dark records, left at the height of his confidence, later became the rope that tightened around him, becomes clearer in the crises and climactic moments that followed. The crisis point, most often remembered as the strangest and boldest phase of Rodney Alcala's criminal history, came when he stepped onto a national television show and willingly exposed himself to the public. In 1978, despite having already murdered several women and being on the radar of law enforcement, Alcala made the shocking decision to apply as a contestant on the popular game show The Dating Game. It was the height of arrogance for a serial killer and a twisted expression of his belief that he could never be caught. On the day of filming, Alcala appeared as Bachelor Number 1 and presented himself as an intelligent, sophisticated photographer. Host Jim Lang introduced him as an active guy who took photos for a living and spent his free time skydiving or riding motorcycles. Throughout the show, Alcala stayed calm, smiled confidently, and tried hard to win over the female contestant, Cheryl Bradshaw. He answered questions with witty comments full of suggestive humor, guided the mood of the program, and eventually beat the other two contestants to become the winner. In front of millions of viewers, a serial killer was crowned an appealing bachelor, but a chilling truth hid behind the glamorous broadcast. Other contestants later said they had felt something deeply unsettling about him. Jed Mills, who shared the green room with Alcala, later recalled that he was one of the creepiest people he had ever met. Alcala behaved aggressively and arrogantly off-camera, and when the cameras stopped rolling, his personality turned cold and dark. It was a striking example of how skillfully he wore a social mask and how much darkness was hiding underneath. In the end, Cheryl Bradshaw told the producers she did not want to go on the date she had won. She said she felt an intense, unexplainable fear during a short conversation with Alcala and sensed something threatening in his eyes. Her instinctive refusal ended up saving her life. Alcala was humiliated, but the rejection only seemed to push him toward even more violent behavior. After appearing on the show, Alcala's crimes escalated. In February 1979, he picked up hitchhiker Monique Hoyt in Riverside County and took her to his apartment. He tied her up, photographed her, and sexually assaulted her in a brutal way. Then he drove her to a remote mountain area and tried to kill her by striking her head with a rock. She managed to escape when he stopped at a gas station, and Alcala suddenly faced his greatest crisis yet. Even though police found incriminating photos and evidence, he was released on bail paid by his mother. Once free again, Alcala did not stop. In June 1979, he kidnapped 12-year-old Robin Samso as she rode her bicycle to ballet class in Huntington Beach. The case shocked the community. Witnesses reported seeing a strange man at the beach offering to take children's pictures. Police created and distributed a composite sketch based on the descriptions. When Alcala's parole officer saw the sketch on television, he recognized the face immediately, and the investigation gained speed. Realizing he was now a suspect, Alcala fled to Seattle, rented a storage locker, and hid his trophies there. He tried to start fresh under a new identity, but police stayed on his trail. In July 1979, he was arrested again, and investigators discovered hundreds of photographs and items in the locker, including earrings believed to belong to Robin Samso. His decision to show his face on national television came back to destroy him. This period revealed the full duality of who Alcala was. On one side, he played the charming bachelor on a popular game show. On the other, he hunted young girls like a predator. He gambled with exposure, convinced that his intelligence would always keep him safe. Instead, the mistakes he made during this time became the clues that eventually locked him in prison forever. The crisis was not just about his arrest. It marked the inevitable fall of a predator who believed he possessed absolute power. The instincts and courage of ordinary people, along with the persistence of the law, slowly closed in on him. Cheryl Bradshaw's intuition, Monique Hoyt's escape, and the sharp observation of a parole officer combined to stop his path of violence. The bright smile he once showed on television was soon replaced by a mugshot and a defendant's seat in the courtroom. The long legal battle that followed was built on the evidence and eyewitness courage secured during this stage. In court, Alcala even played his dating game appearance as part of his defense, trying to claim innocence. But by then, the world had already seen the dark truth hiding behind the glamorous images. His bold attempt to gain fame ended not in celebrity, but in becoming remembered as one of the most notorious killers ever associated with the dating game. The peak of Rodney Alcala's legal story came after his 1979 arrest, when more than 3 decades of relentless and bizarre courtroom battles unfolded. He did not simply sit in the defendant's chair. Instead, he used his intelligence to turn the justice system into a kind of personal game. At his first trial in 1980, he was sentenced to death for the murder of Robin Samso, but the verdict was overturned because the jury had been improperly exposed to details about his prior crimes. At his second trial in 1986, he was again sentenced to death, and once more, the decision was thrown out after Alcala's appeals focused on procedural flaws and controversy over the use of hypnosis and witness interviews. For the victims' families, these reversals were a source of unbearable pain. For Alcala, they seemed to affirm his belief in his own superiority. By the early 2000s, advances in technology brought buried truths back to the surface. DNA extracted from tiny pieces of old evidence became the key that finally locked him in place. Prosecutors in Orange County and Los Angeles used newly processed genetic profiles to connect several unsolved murders from the 1970s to one person, Rodney Alcala. Evidence from the killings of Jill Barkham, Charlotte Lamb, and Georgia Wickstead spoke with a voice that time could not erase. Prosecutors added 4 murder charges to the original Samso case and requested a combined trial, which began in 2010. The third trial was filled with scenes rarely witnessed in American legal history. Alcala dismissed his public defender and insisted on representing himself. He tried to control the courtroom while acting as his own attorney, his own defendant, and even his own witness. Sitting on the stand, he questioned himself and then answered his own questions, referring to himself in the third person as Mr. Alcala and speaking in a lower, almost theatrical tone. He dug through thousands of pages of records, interrupted the prosecution's arguments, and delivered long, monotonous statements intended to wear down the jury. He even went so far as to play clips from his old television appearance in front of the court, pointing to his younger self on the screen. He argued that the earrings he wore then were different from those found at a crime scene. He claimed the photographs he took were not evidence of murder, but merely part of an artistic portfolio. Like a film director explaining his work, he analyzed crime scene images and described encounters with victims as chance meetings or consensual photo sessions, insulting those who had died. His behavior exposed a cruel desire to keep control over his victims even decades later. Prosecutors countered his performance with methodical science and testimony from survivors. Taylor Shapiro, his first known victim from 1968, appeared in court as a grown woman and described in vivid detail the terror she had experienced. The prosecution emphasized that Alcala repeatedly strangled victims until they lost consciousness, then revived them only to choke them again, proving he was not just a murderer but a sadistic predator. Items recovered from his Seattle storage locker made it clear that the belongings and photos he collected were not art but trophies of death. Even during closing arguments, Alcala refused to act normally. Instead of insisting on his innocence, he played the song Alice's Restaurant by Arlo Guthrie through the courtroom speakers, highlighting lyrics about telling a psychiatrist he wanted to kill someone, sneering at the system as if it were all a joke. But theatrics could not stand against the overwhelming physical evidence. After only 2 days of deliberation, the jury found him guilty on all 5 counts of first-degree murder. The climax came when the judge read the death sentence. Alcala remained defiant, insisting he could not remember his crimes and suggesting the courts were wrong. Yet the tears of the victims' families and the determined faces of investigators made it clear that he had reached the end of the line. The sentence handed down in March 2010 was more than punishment. It was a declaration that his decades of cruelty were finally over. Afterward, Alcala was sent to New York to face charges for other murders he had committed there. He admitted to some of those crimes in what appeared to be an attempt to delay his execution in California and gain advantage in the appeals process. But by then, the world knew exactly who he was. The man who once smiled on television as a charming bachelor was now remembered as one of the most brutal serial killers of his era, locked away in a cold prison cell. The courtroom climax showed how his intellectual arrogance ultimately destroyed him. He believed he could outsmart the law, but the records he left behind, the photographs, and the invisible traces on the bodies of his victims condemned him. The long legal process, instead of protecting him, exposed the full weight of his crimes and proved that justice, though slow, does not stop. In the end, this final act was a stage Alcala had created for himself. But the ending was nothing like what he imagined. He wanted to be remembered as the central figure of a dramatic story. Instead, history remembers his victims and the terrible violence he committed. When the courtroom lights dimmed and he was led to death row, the long chronicle of his murders had only its final chapter left to unfold. Rodney Alcala's long criminal story did not end with his 2010 death sentence. Instead, it continued to send shockwaves through society as it moved toward its final chapter. After the sentence was confirmed, investigators focused on more than 1,000 photographs he had kept for decades. Police in Huntington Beach in New York decided to release hundreds of images of unidentified women and children he had photographed. This was not about displaying a killer's belongings. It was a desperate attempt to find clues in many, still unsolved disappearances and murders. Believing that the people in those photos had once been someone's beloved daughter or sister, a nationwide effort began to identify them. As soon as the photos were made public, police stations were flooded with thousands of calls. Families searching for loved ones who vanished decades earlier recognized familiar faces and broke down in tears. Some women came forward to say they were the ones in the photos and described chilling memories of having met Alcala. During this process, the sister of Christine Thornton, who disappeared in 1977, recognized her in a picture wearing a yellow shirt and sitting on a motorcycle. Investigators reopened the case, and DNA testing later confirmed that unidentified remains found in a remote area of Wyoming belonged to Thornton. Even near the end of his life, Alcala was being charged with new murders, proving once again how deep his crimes truly ran. Alcala spent his final years in isolation and misery on California's death row. He never offered sincere remorse or an apology. Instead, he continued to file lawsuits over prison, food and conditions, fighting with authorities until the end. He tried to defend himself in writing, claiming innocence and mocking the world, but to the public he was already known as the dating game killer. As time passed, the once charming face faded into that of a frail, distorted old man, and his sharp intellect could no longer protect him from aging. The exact number of his victims will likely remain a mystery forever. Investigators, looking at the sheer volume of photos, his methods, and his travels across the country, estimated that the real number might reach as high as 130. But Alcala usually refused to answer questions about additional crimes, or he responded vaguely and created confusion. Many saw this as a deliberate attempt to keep the truth hostage and continue tormenting families. Beyond the victims already confirmed, many unnamed souls disappeared forever into the darkness surrounding Alcala. On July 24, 2021, Alcala died not by execution, but from natural causes related to illness at a hospital in Kings County. He was 77 years old. The fact that he died without facing execution left many people feeling empty. Some families who had waited decades for justice were angry that he seemed to pass away too peacefully. Yet his death also meant that one of the most notorious serial killers in history could no longer harm anyone again. He died alone in a cold hospital room, with no one there to see him off. What remained after his death were countless unresolved questions. Many of the women in his photographs still have not been identified, and investigators continue to review unsolved cases connected to him. His legacy is one of destruction and sorrow. The photos he took survive not as art, but as records of crime preserved in police museums and archives. Through him, society learned how cruelty can hide behind charm and intelligence, and those lessons helped shape modern profiling and systems for monitoring sexual predators. Alcala's ending showed both the ordinariness and persistence of evil. He walked among people disguised as a photographer or friendly neighbor, hunting for victims, and he exploited weaknesses in the law to prolong his life for decades. His story may have concluded with his death, but the lessons remain. He reminds us of the danger of judging only by appearances, the importance of forensic science, and the responsibility of the justice system to listen to victims. Rodney Alcala is gone, yet efforts to heal the wounds he caused and uncover the full truth continue today. In the end, his life stands as one of the darkest examples of what happens when intelligence and talent are used solely to destroy others. His path from game show winner to death row inmate and finally to a lonely death in a hospital reveals how long and difficult the road to justice can be. He will be remembered as one of the most sadistic and arrogant killers in history. The names of the lives he stole deserve to be remembered far longer than his own. That is the final message left behind by the dark history of Rodney Alcala. That is the end of today's story. I will upload new cases and mysteries every day. Please subscribe and hit like. Your support makes a big difference. Thank you for watching.